So welcome to this evening's constructive rest. So as you may know, this is something that I offer every month. And it's 20 minutes, half an hour lie down in semi-supine, which is the position of lying on your back with your head on some books or a couple of blocks, with your knees bent and your feet on the ground. And we love lying in semi-supine. We love constructive rest because it allows us to release the chronic tension from the day, chronic patterns of tension that have been with us for a long time. It allows us to think into our body, to connect with all sorts of levels of the self, not just our physical body, but there's always a bit of a reflection through there for our emotional body. And being in stillness, connecting to our stillness, is a way that really allows our spirit a bit of peace, our soul a bit of peace, whatever you want to call it. So it's good all round. We're going to start by finding your shoulder blades, just with your mind. You're not going to poke at them or anything like that. At the moment, because you are lying on your back, your shoulder blades are both close to the ground. And a useful or a nice thing to think of is to imagine that those shoulder blades, so those are the two triangular bones, the back of your shoulders, those shoulder blades are falling to the ground. You could say to yourself, you could think to yourself, well, I'm allowing the shoulder blades to fall into the ground and away from the back of your back rib cage. So your ribs wrap around you, creating a sense of a kind of cylindrical rib cage around the body. And the shoulder blades nestle or rest on them. And when you're vertical, when you're upright, when you're sitting, it's a lovely thing to think that the shoulder blades are resting, or the whole shoulder girdle is resting on the rib cage. But when we're lying down like this in semi-supine, we can think of those shoulder blades falling away from the rib. And then that leaves you that upper back, those upper ribs that are coming off your vertebra and wrapping around you. And you're going to think about that whole area widening, as if you're broadening through your upper back. And your intention is that the ribs themselves are expanding and releasing. They're moving a little bit with every breath that you breathe in and out. And those ribs resting beneath your shoulder blades are expanding and releasing. And that movement, which is tiny, it's minute, quite imperceptible really for anyone looking at you, but that movement is really essential for the area above it, the shoulder girdle itself. It allows that shoulder girdle a bit of elasticity, a bit of freedom, and it allows us to let them rest on the rib cage when we're upright. So I've been decorating a room this week, and part of that is painting the ceiling. And in our house, it seems that the Alexander Technique teacher always gets to paint the ceiling, because the argument is that it doesn't affect my neck and back so much. And part of the reason that is because I look after it so well with doing regular semi-supine constructive rest. So I thought I'd talk you through some of the things I think in preparation for getting on ladders, turning myself inside out, looking up at ceilings with paintbrushes in my hands. So I'd like you to become aware of the back of your head that's resting on your blocks or your books. Specifically, I'd like you to think about the base of your skull, the back of your head. And you're going to ask the muscles there, you're going to think, you're going to send them a message and ask them to widen. And as we ask for that widening across the base of the back of the head, we're releasing the muscles at the backs of the ears. So you could then say to your right ear, I'm just going to let go at the back of my right ear, as if the muscles are falling back to the floor behind you. And then take your thoughts over to the left ear and ask the muscles at the back of the left ear to release, as if you're allowing them to fall back behind you. And then again, this widening, broadening through the base of your skull. It's just a thought. But what that does is allow the top of the spine, which is right up in there, to also fall back to the blocks behind you. So you're thinking to yourself, I'll widen the base of my skull and I'll let the very top of my spine fall back, rest back into the back of my head. And often we think of the spine in the Alexander technique, and we think about the length of it, and we might think of the top of the spine or the tailbone. But today I'd like us to just think of a small section of it. So you've asked for the top of it to unlock, you've released the top of your spine, which is up by your ears and your head. And then you're going to take your mind to the base of your neck, to the back of the base of the neck. And we're going to think of unlocking. We're going to find a way of unlocking that too. And a useful thought is softness, and sort of a warming, softening through the very top muscles across the upper back, top of shoulders. But I like to also think of the bones, and that they're very heavy bones. They're heavier than you think, because when they're alive bones, they've got a little bit more to them than when we pick up a skeleton or anything like that. So they are quite heavy. And you can think about this junction between the neck vertebra and your rib vertebra, the thoracic vertebra, and you can ask for it to drop back, as if the base of the back of your neck is dropping back to the floor behind you. And then if you want to think about this, you could then think back up your neck from the base of the back of the neck, thinking length through those neck vertebra, length up through your head and out through your crown. Just a thought. You don't need to do anything. No sneaky movements, just a thought. Lengthening from the base of your neck out through to your crown. So I'd then like you to take your mind further down your spine just a little bit. We're going to go between your shoulder blades. So the piece of spine in the upper back. And when we're looking up at the ceiling with a paintbrush in our hands, or can't think of anything else, but just generally, if we're trying to paint the ceiling, often that area gets crunched. If the head falls backwards, it's going to be compressing the upper spine, unless it's done with attention, mindful thought. And in fact, to allow your head to look up, or if you were in semi-supine now, if you were to look up just with your eyes, don't look with your whole head, but just look up towards your eyebrows, you might notice that the upper back wants to tighten. It's as if it's protecting you from that head falling backwards. So you're going to take your mind and you're going to put it between your shoulder blades, and you're going to ask for something to release. You're going to say, well, I'm asking my upper spine to soften into length. And this time, instead of thinking up, actually, we're going to think down. So you're going to think from between your shoulder blades as if you're softly lengthening down to the back of your waist. And each of those vertebrae have got a bit of space between them. It's got a disc, and you're going to ask each vertebra to move away from the next one. Goodness, that could take all night. Or you could just say to yourself, I ask my back to lengthen from between your shoulder blades down through to the back of your waist. The thought, it's a want, it's a wish. So there's a lot of lengthening going on here. But what we also need is widening, because we want to create the space in the body, and we are three-dimensional. We are not just a two-dimensional thing. So as you're lying there, I'd like you to say hello to your armpits. Yes, your armpits. And I'd like you to ask them to stop gripping. And it might be, in fact, those muscles just at the front of the armpits, your pectoral muscles, or it might be the muscles just at the back of the armpits. It could be that your habit is to squeeze yourself in your upper rib cage. So you're going to take your mind there, armpit area, ask something to release. So that when you breathe, those ribs under your armpits can expand and release with each breath. Let your head rest again. Soften your jaw. If it's easy, if it's comfortable for your mouth, your jaw, head, neck setup, I'd like you to close your mouth, allowing yourself to breathe through your nose. That works for you. And your tongue that's resting within your mouth, you're going to ask it to rest, to not do anything. It doesn't want to be clamped to the roof of the mouth. It might be touching the roof of the mouth, but that's different from pushing into it. The tongue is resting somewhere in the mouth. And if you really want to add on something for the tongue, you can think of the back of it widening. So we haven't thought much about the lower back. But if we were stood up trying to tilt our head backwards to look at the ceiling, the lower back would probably start to panic too, because of the balance, the loss of balance. And in fact, it's not just that. If we habitually tighten through our neck, if we habitually stick our chins in the air, or, you see those people driving the car with their chin practically on the steering wheel. If that's our habit, then our lower back will be pretty much permanently gripped. So take a moment and take your mind down into your lower back. See if you can ask something to let go in the small of the back. Or imagining a softening of the upper back rim of the pelvis. Don't need to change any shape or anything like that. I mean, it might change shape, who knows? But we're interested in the condition of the musculature, not so much the position that you're in, but more the condition, so that the area around the upper back rim of your pelvis, your lower back area, you could ask it to widen, so that the muscles there enliven themselves into width. And in fact, some of those muscles are lengthening because they're sideways muscles, but that'll just be a bit of a head messer, so let's not go down that road. Asking the lower back to widen. And as soon as we get into the lower back area, we've met the pelvis really. And that in this position is like a bowl lying on its side. And you've got the back of your cereal bowl, which is your back hips resting into the ground. And you can imagine coming around the edges of your cereal bowl to the front of the pelvis, the pubic bone area. And we're going to ask for the front of the pelvis, or in fact the abdominal muscles, to soften. They don't need to be quite as switched on perhaps as we habitually keep them. Soften your belly. Ask your back to widen. And let the heads of your thigh bones rest back into your hip socket. You don't need to know exactly where they are. You can just use a bit of imaginary imagery. I'm a big fan of imagination. You don't need to be a perfectly skilled anatomist for this work. You just have to have a positive intention that the heavy thigh bones, and they are heavy, are allowed to rest back into your hip socket because you're no longer gripping the muscles in the thighs. In fact, your intention is that the muscles in the thighs also relax into length. And we're asking them to lengthen in two directions. So the weight of those thighs are dropping back into you. Obviously, gravity is doing that for us. And you're going to think through the thighs out through your knees to give yourself a sort of an antagonistic force through the thighs. And that really helps sometimes to keep them up there as well. Sometimes people struggle with this position, that the knees want to fall inwards, the knees want to fall outwards. But what we're interested in is the least amount of effort to allow your legs to be in semi-supine. Notice what's going on around the outsides of your thighs. How do they feel? Can you imagine that from the outside hip area, there's length traveling up through the outsides of your thighs? Can you imagine that two-way lengthening so that there's weight coming through the outsides of the thighs and into the ground beyond you? And now in this moment, question where your feet are. Are they in a place that they are habitually put for semi-supine? Do they want to be slightly differently rearranged now that something's let go in your lower back, now that something's changed within the pelvis? Do they need a rest? Do you want to let your knees fall inwards and rest on each other to give your inner thighs a break? Or so that you can release your calves a little bit? So a lot of this work is very specific. We're in small areas of the body, like the calves, the knees, the thighs. And sometimes it's good to remind ourselves in a bit more of a global thinking. And you can, in this moment, say to yourself, what about that lengthening through the crown? What about that ease of upper spine from the base of your neck, lengthening through the back of the neck and out through the top of your head? And then you could generally think to yourself, well, what I want is the top of my head, the crown, to release away from the tail, head away from tailbone. Nothing going on with the tailbone. It is just there lying, being the back of your pelvis. You don't have to do anything with it. And then we could generally think, well, we'd want a bit of widening, and we want the widening through the whole of everything wants to widen. And so you could say to yourself, give yourself the directed thought, I ask I'd like the whole of my back to widen. And if you're still lying in semi-supine, which is absolutely fine, you might think to yourself, do you know, I'd like the whole of my front to widen. So we're going to take our lengthening, widening body, and we're going to pick a side to lie on. And in your mind, when you know which side you're going to roll over onto, you're going to think about the muscles at the back of your ear closest to that side. So say, for example, you're rolling to the left, you're going to say, well, I'm going to release the muscles at the back of my left ear, and I'm going to let my head turn and my body follow, and I'm going to end up lying on my side. And you can take your time. And it might be that when you get on your side, you need to shove a little something under your head, an arm or a handy nearby cushion, whatever you like. But we're going to pause for a moment lying on the side. And the reason is because your ribs love lying on your side. The shoulders can get a bit jammy lying on the side, and sometimes the hips can get a bit uncomfortable, but you know, the rib cage loves it. And the side of your ribs that you are closest to the floor with, you could say to those ribs, it's okay, you can let go, the floor is beneath you. So the side of you that's closest to the floor, from your armpit all the way through to the hip, you can say, it's okay, all of that side of me can lengthen, it can undo, can release into width. And the side of your body that's closest to the ceiling or the sky, you can imagine or ask that that side springs up away from the side of the floor. As if the free side of your rib cage has got all of the space that it needs to expand. And you say for a moment, there's my ribs free and springing. The back widening, just ask it again, the whole of your back to be widening. And if you have got something comfortable under your head and you feel that you can, really say to that neck, you don't have to hang on, this head can rest. The jaw can hang a little to that side that it falls naturally towards. The inner thigh of the top leg can just let go a little bit more because gravity is helping it now. So you've been semi-supine thinking now for pretty much half an hour. And at this point, I would be inclined to come from your lying on your side position and sit up. But you might think to yourself, no, Gemma, I've got nothing to get to. I'm staying on the floor. And if that's the case, then you could bend your top leg and place the foot behind you on the floor, and you'll roll back into semi-supine. And then you've got a choice whether you want to roll over and think about doing the other side. I won't be talking you through the other side because I will be shuffling off now, probably to carry on with my painting, aren't I lucky? I'll put this recording up on the Facebook group, Constructive Rest Club. And if you want it, if you want the direct link because you're not on Facebook, you can let me know and I can send you the link for that. And I have absolutely no idea when the next one is, because I've been in decorating mode, not teaching mode. Thank you all for coming, and I hope that you relaxed and enjoyed your directed thinking. See you again. Bye for now.